aye. 7 in favor, no one opposed. Motion carries.
And finally, I move that we continue the public hearing for 10 Commerce Boulevard till later in the meeting and open the continued public hearing on the MBT zoning bylaw amendments.
Okay. We have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call
Okay.
vote. Mr. Boissy.
Aye.
Mr. English.
Aye.
Mr. Lawrence.
Aye.
Mr. Maloney.
Aye.
Mr. Wardman.
Aye.
Mr. Woodhams.
Aye.
Mike McKnight, aye. 7 in favor, no one opposed. Motion carries.
Nope, I can only hear through your phone. That's it.
Mr. O'Neill, we're going to ask you to fix your muting situation, please. Vice Chairman Gallo, do you want to open your Board of Selectmen meeting?
Thank you, Chairman McKnight. We do, and we'll do a roll call vote. Selectman Anderson,
Anderson here.
Selectman Harrington,
Harrington here.
Selectwoman Rouse,
Rouse here.
Chris Gallo here.
Thank
So-
you. And is the EDC opening a hearing tonight, Rachel?
They did post for
Mr.
a
Chair,
meeting-
if I could, I did hear late this evening that they will not have a quorum. So I believe they have a posted meeting, but they will not be opening their meeting. So that anyone that from the EDC will be speaking as a resident, not on behalf of the EDC. So they will not be opening a meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Sweet. And recognizing Mr. Sweet here is in the meeting as well.
Present,
Welcome.
thank you.
As a matter of the planning board, at least, and then I'll turn it over to Vice Chair Gallo.
the
our
Board of
goal-
Assessors is also here. Sorry.
Okay, just as a attendee from the town. Got it.
No, the Board of Assessors are also
Board of
here.
Assessors, do they need to open their public hearing for,
Yes.
okay. And who is here for the Board of Assessors to open your public hearing?
Yep, Tom DePlacido, Chairman of the Board of Assessors. A couple of our members are having a difficulty hearing. Ed O'Neill. Okay, but I'd like to make a motion to open our meeting with Ed. Can you-
Second,
Mhm. And Irene, can you hear? That's all right. With the two of us here, that's enough of a quorum to open up the meeting between Ed and ourselves. All right.
Okay. Are you all set, Mr. DePlacido?
Mike,
Sorry,
you're,
I'm
Mike, you muted
muting.
yourself. It sounds like Mr. O'Neill has feedback, and whenever he turns off his mute, we hear ourselves talking through his.
Yes, I think, so just as a matter for the planning board, then I'll turn it over to the other members here who have open public hearings. Planning board has been meeting on this, have kept their public hearings open. Our goal was from the last meeting was to start to peel back the work that Rachel and our consultant had done on the evaluation of all the sites in town and better understand how we got to the two and maybe back that up to understand what other sites are out there so that we could evaluate those, look at them, understand what the process was in terms of either disqualifying them or saying they didn't meet the statute requirements. That would be the intent of the planning board. We have been communicating within town about having a bit more of a working session in terms of different boards, different members, and really trying to make sure that we are communicating effectively across all of the boards in town so that the information is being shared. And as this is a complicated and fairly large decision the town has to make, making sure that we're collaborating properly and hearing each other and making sure that that information is flowing. So that would be the planning board's intent. Vice Chair Gallo, if you want to introduce.
thank you, Mr. Chair. Great to be with you and your board. And to your point, conversations started between you and Chairman Botash on our board. And you guys agreed to the importance to keep our boards in constant communication. You and I had a great conversation about trying to push that forward and do the same. And I thought it was just it's timely for us to just give a quick summary of the select board's position on our multi-pronged strategy. I know that, for the intent of this public hearing tonight, we would have I think we agreed to have the select board read through quickly some of the financial impact statements that we've received from some of the department heads, boards, and committees in town. As you alluded to, the planning board would take the lead with the identification or identification of the parcels, potentially adding a couple that have been recommended. And then we also wanted to quickly just share with the planning board and the other boards and committees and residents on this meeting that, there's also a legal challenge going on in other communities. And we wanted to just give a quick update as to how we're handling that and what we have planned coming up shortly. So with that being said, people always ask us, people ask me, what we're doing to educate the residents about the MBTA community zoning. And the purpose of this meeting, as we discussed, is to get the necessary feedback from the other important boards, committees, and residents so that we can provide an update to our multi-pronged strategy that the town has taken regarding the zoning ordinance. So real quick, we have three-pronged strategy. Prong or step number one is we try to have and continue to have open and direct dialogue with the state, trying to get relief on number of units, have more say in our town's future, and just to get a seat at the table per our town charter and local zoning policies. We've always taken the approach that we want the voters, not the state legislators, to make the important and impactful decisions relating to our town's future. We've been in communication. A one-size-fits-all mentality will not work here in Wrentham for our residents, and it's not in their best interests. And we've had multiple meetings with members of the governor's team, with results really not changing at this point. So prong number two was the identification of the parcels. We've asked the planning board to re-identify the parcels that were deemed as potentially not a good fit from the first presentation. We've also asked the planning board to add a couple of additional ones that could be decent candidates, including the Wrentham outlets. Prong step number two has a few options in itself. So option one, the townspeople can vote the zoning ordinance down, like some of the other towns have done, and not to zone any parcels as MBTA. This has potential positive and negative impacts of not being eligible for certain grants that we need to continue to dive into and see how that would impact our community. We also have a second option that we zone something that we don't think or want could be built, right? So there's other towns that are doing what's called, as you guys know, paper zoning, just to be compliant with the MBTA communities, with the ordinance. But the intent is really never to build them. So that is an option for the townspeople to vote at town meeting. The third option is to zone something with the intent to build, but has the least negative impact on the existing town resources and town services. And prong or step number three is the legal challenge to the enforceability or constitutionality of this zoning ordinance. Selectwoman Rouse will focus on this really quickly later and give an update to this group as to what other towns have been doing, and that we have an event scheduled, an informational purposes only event scheduled on May 9th in our community. So with that being said, Chairman McKnight, I just wanted to give a quick summary of where we are, how we got to this point, and kind of our plan and path forward. If it's okay with you, I'm going to turn it over to the individual select board members and have them quickly read, and obviously we know we have a full agenda, so we're going to be brief, but read the impact studies from the various department heads that we've had. I do want to make a quick disclaimer though. This information will be available on the MBTA Communities project link, and these are only estimates. This is not all accurate data. There's way too many unknowns for us to ask the department heads to really hone in on, financial analysis that we can all hang our hats on. It's preliminary in nature, and it's not essentially accurate. So I want to have full disclosure there. But what we try to do, Mr. Chair, is say to the department heads, hey, if we threw 750 units in any location in town, can you give us a rough idea of the impacts and needs that would have on your departments, if that makes sense? So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to the first person, Select Board, Selectman Bill Harrington, who's going to read the Public Works Financial Impact by Brian Antonoli, our DPW Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it's a letter from Brian Antonoli, MBTA Communities Effects on DPW Services in Wrentham. My understanding that 750 units would be built. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, Norfolk County averages 2.53 people per household. Some potential impacts to be considered regarding DPW services would include trash, roadways, stormwater drainage, staffing, work orders, and drinking water. First, trash. No impact likely. Development would be private, so wouldn't be included in the town's solid waste program. Roadways, minimal impact but negative. The roadways and the development would be private, so no responsibility for plowing or roadway maintenance. Though the vehicles will be most likely exit to state roads, some will use town roads. The increase on town roads will increase wear, tear of infrastructure, similar to any development. 3, stormwater drainage. Potential for negative impact, depending on the amount of pavement and building sizes, most likely end up with less previous area for stormwater leach back into earth. This would hurt groundwater discharge and water quality in streams, lakes, etc., as less water would filter through the earth. Also, potential for positive impact if the stormwater is kept on site following a proper approved plan. This could help keep potential pollutants via stormwater runoff out of the town stormwater system. Also help lessen volume going into the stormwater system. 4, staffing, negative impact. DPW is already working with limited staff. We do the best we can. The town has grown over the last several decades, and the staffing certainly hasn't kept pace. Adding 1,900 plus new people to town will certainly increase the frequency of calls for service. That's more people using town parking lots, parks, the common, driving on both town and state roads. That's more people reporting issues with all of that. Potholes, tree issues, snow-related issues, etc. All that requires staff to take the call, look at the problem, and then solve the issue. All things DPW currently does, but will certainly increase in frequency. That all puts more stress on the staff and resources, even if the units are built on private ways. 5, drinking water supply, negative impact. This would lead to an average daily increase of 114,165 gallons per day. This would equate to 40,783,430 gallons more water usage per year. See Appendix A for breakdown. This would further stress the already stressed Charles River Basin, as the majority of the town's water is drawn from the Charles River Basin. This would also lead to increased costs in disinfection and corrosion control that is directly related to the amount of water pumped and treated. Estimated chemical costs of $19,616.35 per year. See Appendix B for breakdown. Positive impact, revenue would increase an estimated $263,809 per year. See Appendix C for breakdown. Respectfully submitted, Brian Antonoli, Director of Public Works, Town of Wrentham. And then the Appendix A for the yearly water increase math, 59 gallons per Wrentham resident per day, based off 2023 annual statistical reports. 2.5 people per household, average U.S. Census Bureau, would be 750 units. 2.53 people times 750 is 1,897.5 additional residents on an average. 1,898 new residents at 59 gallons per day, 111,982 gallons additional per day. 111,982 gallons per day at 365 days is 40,873,430 gallons per additional year. You've got the Appendix B for chemical usage. FY23 was $150,895 spent on water treatment chemicals, 324 million gallons. water treated in 2023, 40,873,000 on 40 additional gallons at that rate of 0.126 rounded to 13%, be 150,895 times 0.13 for a $19,616 increase in chemical costs. Appendix C, revenue increase, $6.46 per thousand for first billing tier, 40,873,000 430 gallons per additional times 646 is 264,042,357.80 divided by 1,000 is $264,042. This was computed only using the lowest tier. The actual increase in revenue could be reasonably anticipated higher. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Selectman Harrington. This time I'm going to ask Selectwoman Rouse to read Wrentham Public Schools and King Philip Regional School financial impact summaries.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. From Alan Cameron, Superintendent of Wrentham Public Schools. Dear members of the Wrentham Select Board, I am writing in response to your request for information regarding the impact to the Wrentham Public Schools of the town adopting a zoning district that would allow for multifamily housing. The proposed zoning district change would be in response to the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority MBTA Communities Zoning Law. The Massachusetts School Building Authority, MSBA, conducted an enrollment projection for Wrentham Public Schools as part of the Roderick Elementary School building project. MSBA considered the impact of potential housing developments in our town, including development associated with the MBTA Communities Zoning Law. They estimated an increase of about 50 students in kindergarten through grade 6. The 50 additional students would add to the challenges associated with the limited space at Delaney School and the Roderick School. The district is in dire need of additional classrooms, meeting spaces, science and technology engineering labs, gymnasiums, visual art rooms, and performing art spaces. Fortunately, the MSBA supported building project at Roderick School will significantly improve the situation. Without it, the district would struggle to meet the needs of the students. Please let me know if I can assist you further with this issue. Thank you for all you do for Wrentham. Yours truly, Alan Cameron, Superintendent of Wrentham Public Schools. Rich Droulet, Superintendent of King Philip Schools. We at King Philip do not have anything to add related to the analysis of our department at this time, except to say we would definitely fit more students in our two buildings, as King Philip's enrollment has declined by about 200 students over the past 5 to 10 years. So we could fit a couple hundred more students, but if that were to happen, we would obviously need to add more teachers and staff if our enrollment were to increase considerably. Thanks, Rich Droulet, Superintendent of King Philip Schools.
Thank you, Selectwoman Rouse. And just on that note from the schools, we are waiting. Didn't we ask for, and we are waiting for some further financial analysis from School Committee Chair Phil Jordan? Go ahead, sorry.
Yes, we are waiting for that analysis, and as soon as we receive that, we'll make that available to the public.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chair, last but not least, I'm going to ask Selectman Jim Anderson to read the fire and police summary impact statements.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. This is from Chief Marino, Wrentham Fire Department, dated April 26, 2024. Dear honorable members of the board, the task you have requested is extremely dependent upon a vast number of variables. I cannot speculate on the exact impacts of such a project without first knowing the entire scope. Location, type of building, occupancy, and occupants' physical and mental capacity will play a significant role in the various impacts to emergency services provided by the fire department. Regardless of the scope, we already face significant challenges with staffing and equipment. Any project of this magnitude will require a modest increase in staffing, equipment, training, and other resources. Please see the generic areas of concern below to form a basic opinion of the impacts. Generic overview. The addition of a 750-unit dense residential project in a community significantly impacts fire and emergency medical services. The nature of this impact generally involves both increased demand for services and the need for adjustments in infrastructure, personnel, and operational strategies. Below are the key areas of impact and considerations for fire and EMS services. 1, increased demand for services. Emergency calls. A larger population concentrated in a high-density area will naturally lead to an increase in the number of emergency calls. This includes both fire-related incidents and medical emergencies. Diverse needs. In dense residential settings, there can be a greater diversity in the types of emergencies, ranging from standard medical emergencies to more complex situations like fires in high-rise structures requiring specialized response strategies. 2, infrastructure requirements. Access and water supply. Adequate infrastructure to support firefighting efforts, such as sufficient water supply and access points for fire trucks, is crucial. High-rise buildings, in particular, require considerations like standpipes, sprinkler systems, and fire hydrants. Facilities upgrades. There might be a need to upgrade existing fire and EMS facilities, or even build a new one to ensure rapid response times and adequate coverage for a new development. 3, resource allocation. Staffing. An increase in the number of personnel might be necessary to handle the additional workload. This includes This includes not just frontline firefighters and EMS workers, but also support staff for logistical and administrative tasks. Equipment. Additional resources such as fire engines, ambulances, and special rescue equipment may be required to handle emergencies in high-rise buildings. Training. Number 4, training and preparedness. Specialized training. Personnel may require additional training specific to challenges presented by high-density living environments, such as high-angle rescues, managing fires in the high-rise buildings, and navigating complex building layouts. Community safety education. Programs to educate residents about fire safety, emergency preparedness, and preventative measures can be crucial in preventing emergencies, ensuring a swift response when they occur. Response times. Impact on response times. The added traffic and population density can affect the response times for emergencies. Strategically located fire and EMS stations can help minimize this impact. Zoning and planning. Coordination with urban planners and developers to ensure that emergency services access is a core consideration in the layout of a new department. In a new development. Number 6, regulatory and compliance issues. Building codes and regulations. Ensuring that new constructions comply with the latest fire safety standards in building codes is critical. This might include provisions for fire-resistant materials, proper exit routes, and emergency evacuation plans. Increase enforcement and review. Increased staffing in Fire Prevention Bureau to perform initial inspections and annual inspections to congregate living will be a necessity. Number 7, collaboration with other agencies. Integrated response planning. Collaboration with the police, local hospitals, and other emergency services is essential for effective emergency management in densely populated areas. Mutual aid agreements. Strengthening, establishing mutual aid agreements with neighboring jurisdictions can provide additional support and resource sharing in times of large-scale emergencies. Conclusion. For fire and EMS departments, the development of a 750-unit dense residential project necessitates comprehensive review and potential expansion of current capabilities. Effective planning and resource management are crucial to ensure the safety and well-being of both residents within the new development and the community at large. Proactive measures include strategic planning, investment in resources, and community engagement are essential components of successful integration of such a significant residential project into the community's fabric. I hope this helps with the basic overview. As you know, this is a very complex topic. Please reach out to me with any questions, concerns. Respectfully, Tony Marino, Fire Chief. Now I'll read an email from Chief McGrath. Good evening. My only concern would be that the potential impact the development of this size would have would be on calls for service. If this was to move forward, I would request additional police officers over a period of years. Our current staffing levels are insufficient to handle the added calls resulting from new developments in town, including Ledgeview with its hotel, apartments, and assisted living facility. I'm confident staffing plan can be achieved with the town administrator. Respectfully, Chief William Grath. That's it, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Selectman Anderson. So Chairman McKnight, that's the quick summary of the department heads that we've received. The only other update that we could provide, not the only one, but another one that I think is very important for you, your board, the other board's president, and the residents listening, would be a quick update on the legal challenge aspect from Selectwoman Rouse. And she could hopefully tell us all about an event that we have scheduled to bring the residents some additional information in that matter.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I think that when we started on this journey back, the select board started on this journey back earlier in the year, our intent was to make sure that all the residents had as much information as possible to make the most informed decision for them and the town, since this is probably the most important decision that residents will be making for some time. And in doing so, as Mr. Vice Chair went through the different options that the residents will be making decisions on, one of them is really understanding what it would mean if we vote no, what it would mean with the paper zoning, and the third with the legal challenges. So we have invited Michael Walsh to join us on May 9th in Wrentham at the Fisk Library in the Sweat Room at 7 p.m. He and his team have been doing presentations throughout the Commonwealth called Myths and Truth related to the MBTA. So he goes through a presentation giving correct information to a lot of questions residents within Wrentham and other towns in the Commonwealth have had related to the MBTA. Is it constitutional? What does the MBTA mandate really include? What are we really required to do? Do we have to do this? All of those questions are answered throughout his presentation as part of an educational forum for different residents in different towns. So he will be joining us again on May 9th. It will be at the Fisk Library in the Sweat Room at 7 p.m. I ask that you attend the meeting. I also ask that you spread the word. Again, this decision will be affecting each resident in our town for generations to come. And we, the select board, want to make sure that you have all the necessary information to make the best decision for yourself and for this town.
Thank you, Selectwoman Rouse. Mr. Chairman, at this time, the only other thing that I'd like to say before handing it back to you is that we have the select board has already started the conversation about potentially marking some dates down for a special town meeting that we can vote on this. We feel like we want to have a meeting before our end of the year meeting. Depending on which way this goes, we might have to, it will affect the November meeting. So the select board and town manager Sweet and his staff are already looking into possible dates and expenses to have a special meeting. But at this point, it's our opinion that it's necessary so that, again, we can give the residents ample time and information to make the best decision for the town. So with that, I thank you so much for the collaboration. I thank you for letting us be a part of your meeting, and hopefully now I can turn it back over to you and we can discuss any thing you'd like to update us on with parcel review.
Great. Thank you, Vice Chair Gallo and select board members. I think all of that was very helpful. The more information we have, the better we're all going to be informed to make a decision. I may turn it over at this time, maybe brief Mr. DePlacido if you have any comments that either the Board of Selectmen, the Planning Board, EDC, or the members or residents who are here would like for information from your perspective on how this development would impact the town.
Well, I think from a Board of Assessors and assessment of properties point of view with everything, once the we're down to a critical short list of maybe just one or two properties, that the Board of Assessors be given the opportunity to see what the positive and negative impacts are of the the zoning that's underlying and already in existence, if that is changed to MBTA Communities Act, how that either negative or positively approaches, actually works with the town as far as being a more of a positive impact or a negative impact. Obviously, we're hearing a lot of expenses here from the different departments, and we'd want to make sure that we actually rezone the most advantageous piece as far as revenue producing, and not actually take a piece of property off the tax roll that is actually has the potential to produce revenue for the town. So I think that's something that once we're down on that short list, if the assessors could possibly take a look at that and give some input back to the planning board to help you make your decisions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. DePlacido. Before we move into, I think, Rachel, you have a presentation. We're going to peel back the onion a bit on some of the sites and understand how the decision was actually made to get to 2 final sites. Just run down the list of planning board members to see if you have any comments or questions while we have the select board here and while we have Mr. DePlacido here. So initially, Mr. Boissy, any?
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Okay, Mr. English?
None from me.
Mr. Lawrence?
Yeah, I just, Vice Chairman Gallo, do we have a accounting of the resources that will be taken away if we decide not to go forward and comply with the law? That's the only question I have. I mean, I understand there's going to be a certain amount of added tax base and a certain amount of added expense to the town to accommodate these people. But what I haven't heard tonight, and I don't know if it's a knowable thing at this point, is, there are a number of, I don't know, state funds that would no longer be available to the town that the town uses now. Do we have an accounting of all that available to the townsfolk?
So that's a great question. Through you, Mr. Chair, sorry.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Great question, Mr. Lawrence. We're still diving into that. That's part of this legal challenge to see if the state can pull these grant funds back. The grant funds, and I'll let Selectwoman Rouse chime in as well, but to the best of my knowledge, the only grant funds that are potentially on the table for us to lose if we don't comply and if they're able to pull them from us are the Mass Work grants. I don't have the number. Hopefully maybe Kevin Sweet does or Rachel, of what we typically use per year in Mass Work grants, what potentially could be on the table if we chose not to vote this in. But at this time, with your permission, Mr. Chair, I'd like to see if Selectwoman Rouse or Kevin Sweet had anything to add to that.
Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I would just add to that, Jim, that would be part of the presentation that will be discussed on May 9th, since there's been a lot of misinformation in the media and just through discussions that individuals that have had, that has spread, rumors that it could be, different funds that might not be true. So the attorney is going to go through exactly what would be impacted by the state and what the state can actually hold back in the Mass Works grants. So that should be covered on May 9th. And then I turn it over to Mr. Kevin Sweet for additional information.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Chair, the law itself, the act for the MBTA Communities 3A Act, is very specifically lists the grants that would be in jeopardy. And that is, as was stated, the Mass Works grant, some housing related grants, housing choice related grants, and it's very specific of those. It's hard to say definitively because we have seen firsthand some pretty liberal interpretations of that law. And a perfect example of that is the town of Milton, who, as you probably most of you are aware of, did not pass. It was an election where essentially they had a seawall grant that the state, once that happened, the state had pulled back. That certainly is not part of a Mass Works grant or some of these specific grants that were identified in the law or the act. So I think it's really unknown. We're starting to see they're really the first community that we're seeing this. And I think we've seen some pretty extreme interpretations, in my view, of the law. And I think at this point it's sort of open-ended. What I will say, they're going under civil litigation through the court system. I think the state has a lot more flexibility to be able to pull back administrative things and grants that they have. So it's really hard to quantify what that would be. I will say the last MassWorks grant that the town received was a number of years ago, about 8 years ago or so, and that was related to the water infrastructure improvement tied into the Ledgeview project, with the upgrade of the water line down Route 1, specific to a mixed-use component and specific to the attraction of housing and commercial and retail. So that's the last grant we've received related to MassWorks. We have applied for others. But again, just a reminder, it is an unknown component at this point, and we've already seen them step outside of specifically what the law states would be in jeopardy. Hopefully that helps.
Great, thank you. Mr. Lawrence, any other questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Maloney?
Just a couple of things, Mr. Chairman. One is Selectwoman Rouse, just to make you aware, you probably know this, but the Sagebrush Rebellion has expanded to Marshfield. They shot, the town meeting voted against a proposal, a proposed MBTA Communities plan, 63-37. It was about a week ago, a week and a half ago. So the dissatisfaction appears to be spreading for what it's worth, and we'll learn more on May 9th, as you say. And the Milton response to the state's complaint, I think there's a key factor in that. Milton's actually attacking the law at its root, basically saying that the executive branch of the state is creating legislation, not just issuing guidelines, and that they're exceeding their authority by doing so. So I think, for what it's worth, when we get to May 9th, I would be interested in hearing about some of those things from our guest. Last thing for me, Mr. Chairman, is Kevin made a good point about the MassWorks program and the extension of the water line down Route 1. If the state insists on withholding funds for development like that, how does the state prosper? If we couldn't have built Ledgeview, we wouldn't have had more residential units, which is what we wanted there. And so anyway, that's all. I'm sorry to editorialize, but I appreciated the presentation. I look forward to further discussion.
Thank you. Mr. Orban?
No questions at this time.
Mr. Woodhams?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Lawrence, for bringing up the point that I was going to make, which is, has anybody figured out what the total financial impact is? And while I respect what has been said, that, this is what the law says, the state can and can't do. My take on this whole thing from the very beginning, from the state's involvement, has been that the state's going to keep moving the goalposts until the state gets what the state wants. And I have no confidence that they're not going to just keep taking more and more pieces away to get towns and cities to comply. Just the money that we could potentially lose from what they say they could take away from us is bad enough, but I fear that they would keep going. They have not hesitated to change things whenever it suited them. And one of the other aspects that I think we have to think about, if we don't make a serious effort to come up with some form of compliance on this, is how much will it cost the town to defend itself against a likely lawsuit from the Attorney General's office? And aside from losing funds and grants, we now are talking about tens, or if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees to defend ourselves against a lawsuit, which, if we lose it, we're still going to end up with this zoning. And the problem is then the state's going to come in and say, okay, this is where you're going to put it. Because you didn't do it voluntarily, we're going to tell you where it goes. So I understand, trust me, I understand people's feelings on this. I hate that the state is trying to force this on us, but I also think we need to look at things through a lens of the reality is if we don't do something, we will cause the town considerable cost and harm. And I think we need to make sure that while we certainly explore all avenues as far as legal challenges and that kind of thing, I think it's irresponsible if we don't come up with an honest plan that we put forth that is something that we know that the state will approve. You know, it'd be easy to pick out a bunch of parcels that we know people aren't going to want to build on, and the state will reject it outright. They have said that one of the aspects of this development is it has to be considered, I can't remember the exact terms, but basically feasible for a developer to want to come in and build it. And if you put it on a piece of land that is going to be so cost ineffective for a developer that none of the developers are going to be willing to do it, the state will just reject that site as being acceptable. And I know there's been a lot of talk about looking at other sites, and we certainly can look at that, but I think we need to be careful that we don't put ourselves in a situation where we finally come up with something, the town votes to approve it, and the state just rejects it, and then we're back to square one, and potentially under you know, legal challenge at that point by the state. So that would be my only comment at this time. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Woodhams.
Chair, do you mind if I just,
Please, sorry, Vice Chair Gallo, go ahead.
No, that's fine. I just want to address Mr. Woodham's comment. You know, I too have concerns, compliance or not compliance, but some of the things that Mr. Woodham shared are completely speculative at this point. That's the job and that's the intent of this board and this committee and this group of people, is to figure out what the actual impacts are. You know, there are other communities besides Milton and Marshfield and Shrewsbury and Middleborough and the North Shore towns like Gloucester. The list is building of people that are not complying and are proposing legal challenges to this. My opinion is we don't act out of fear. We act out of the facts that we have at hand. And right now, the facts at hand are there's way too many unknowns to make an educated decision you know, to bring to the townspeople. Never once did we suggest that we don't give them an option of a buildable project. I think I was very clear in one of my prompts. We're going to leave that up to the townspeople. Our job is to give all of the information that we possibly can so that the townspeople can make the decision that they feel is best for us. One of the prongs, again, was we zone a very buildable project, and that is an option. Another option is we paper zone a project that is likely not buildable, and a lot of towns have done that, and the state has not pushed back as of yet. They have been in compliance by doing that. So some of the things that you're saying, I don't know where you're hearing them, but this is why we need to all go to this May 9th meeting, because there's a lot of misinformation. I'm not saying that you're wrong, but there's a lot of misinformation going on out there. And I know that I'm not ready to make a decision this important or bring it to the townspeople with the current information that I have. I'd just like to see if any of the other select board members want to chime in on this before we move on from this point, because it is a very important one.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I think that you hit all the important pieces. There are a significant amount of towns that are fighting back, looking to join or have already joined Rockport's civil suit about this mandate. In addition, there is a group of citizens throughout the Commonwealth that have created a website called enoughma.org. I encourage residents to take a look at that. It gives some more information about the mandate, about misinformation that's being out there. And I will stress again with what Mr. Vice Chair Gallo has stated, the intent of May 9th, Thursday, next week, is to go over all of this misinformation that is being put out there. And the state has been using threatening words, even in our discussion on our February 6th meeting, when we had a visitor from the state come to that meeting. She brought up misinformation about our town and schools closing and just wrong information. So I really encourage you to educate yourself beyond, you know, just mass media. go to some other websites that have information and come listen to the attorney that is representing different towns in this Commonwealth and has the right information legally related to this mandate. Thank you.
Thank you, Selectwoman Rouse. Anybody else from the select board like to make a comment before we?
Yeah,
pass?
if I might, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Through you, and Mr. McKnight, thank you. Look, to Mr. Woodens directly, at no point is anyone on this particular board trying to convince people not to do what is being pressed upon us. What we're trying to do is make the most accurate decision to bring to the people of the town to let them decide. The impact could be more dramatic than the cost to not do it. But these are things we don't know. And what we don't know is we don't know what we don't know. And we certainly don't need to spread any type of fear into the blitz, if you will. It's an education that we all need, and it's a learning process, and we want to provide the best information to the townspeople, the 12,000 people that are going to be here to live with this mess, if you will. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Selectman Harrington. Thank you, thank you, Chairman McKnight. Pass it back to you.
Great, thank you. Rachel, what I'd like to do, and we've got another public hearing tonight, so I'd like to take no more than the next 25 minutes in fairness to the other public hearings. So we are not going to open this up to a wide breadth of commentary from those on that are here from the public. This is an informational session. It's our first collaborative meeting. We're trying to share information and get it out. And I think to that end, Rachel, without going through the whole presentation, it would be good. What we wanted to understand was the process that you and the engineer that was hired or was granted to us went through. What were the guardrails? And then how did you move from, and I don't think we need to look at every site in town. I think we get down to the, hey, you know, we got to 2, but we had 10, you know, and these were the sites, and here's why we excluded them for whatever reason. So that gives us a little bit more breadth and depth on what you looked at, why you looked at it, why you excluded it, what the guardrails were. That might help us all understand whether things fit into the bylaw or the law that's being presented to us, or they didn't, from your perspective and the consultant's perspective by reading the law. So with that, also, just one last comment. I believe that the planning board's role in this is to make a recommendation. Now, we may not all vote to approve it, which means that I think in this case, the planning board recommends favorable action, no action, or last one is negative action, right? But my question is, if we're creating the sites and we're going to present and vote on them as a planning board, are there other options that anyone else, zoning board, planning board, outside the planning board, can create at town meeting to give the townspeople other options versus the one the planning board is acting on? Or is it strictly our recommended or not recommended proposal?
So I did see something on the Mass Planner listserv that sort of did talk about this and, you know, says to work with your moderator. So that way those type of on town meeting floor amendments don't happen. And that's only because the language of the public hearing notice is very specific. And that's why, essentially. But
That
that's
is
why
how the
you're also
planning
having
board-
the public hearings too,
Right.
you know?
But
And
that is the role of the board, is to
Yes.
create an option, vote on it, and the
Yes.
vote would be one of those 3, not to approve or disapprove, but to vote favorable action. Is that
yes,
favorable action, no action, or? So it's a little bit complex in terms of how this is going to get to town floor. I just want to let everybody know what the planning board's role in this is, and that, you know, we can choose one of those 3 on something that we actually created. So it's a little bit strange in the way this is going to all come about to town meeting floor. But hopefully we get to that point with one agreed recommended option. So I'll turn it over to you, Rachel, for maybe, a few minutes of helping people understand how you got to where you got to and what some of the other sites are that we might want to think about and put back on the table.
Okay, I am the only person on this, so if you send me a chat while I am doing this, I'm not going to read it. I can't do all the things at once. Sorry, guys. All right, here, let's share. Don't be scared. I wasn't ever going to go through all 47 slides. I'm going to stop my video, so that way we have a little bit more. Let's get this out of my way. Okay, so I was going to go through all these things: introduction, overview of law guidelines, what is required to comply, site selection. I think we'll focus on these two as well. So let's go down here. So this was essentially the new Section 3A of the Zoning Act, which created an MBTA community and sort of guardrails as to how to locate these items. At least one district of reasonable size. You can go ahead and read that. This is just the text of the law. Going through site selection, I'm sure a couple of you on this in this board committees are do land development, so you probably understand this site selection process already. I'm going to shorten it down. So there are just general principles in the compliance. So there's the law, as has been noted, but then there were also within that law, the MBTA HLC were promulgated, I can't say that word, criteria, guidelines for compliance. And so these are just the general principles on that. So understanding that even though, yes, we don't have a transit station, we do benefit from proximity to transit stations. The districts required by 3A should encourage the development of multifamily housing projects of a scale, density, and aesthetic that are compatible with existing surrounding uses and minimize impacts to sensitive land. Reasonable size, they understand, is relative, and not everybody is the same. They understand all 77 communities are different. And so within those guidelines, you have separate requirements. And then when possible, these districts should be in areas that have safe, accessible, and convenient access to transit stations for pedestrians and bicyclists. And these other ones I will include them in the final one to let you go a little bit deeper into the thought process of how we got here. But for the sake of time, I am skipping ahead. So this is just a summary of essentially what you need to do. Zoning must allow multifamily housing as of right. That does not mean that they just come in with a plan and they immediately get a building permit. As part of this, what the state is asking you to do, not only zone for it, it's also asking you to create regulations. And within that, you can require a site plan review. And there's a whole bunch of things that you can require as part of that they include. That would be reviewed by an engineer, a peer reviewer. They still have to meet stormwater requirements. They still have to meet wetland requirements and septic requirements. The zone must be of reasonable size. For us, it's 50 acres. You can do 25 contiguous and 5 acres, or 50 acres in total. If you do that first one, the subject districts can have varying densities. So to match, again, the area that you're sort of looking at. The minimum gross density has to be 15 units per acre and a unit capacity of 750 units. This is not a production mandate. So these homes don't have to be built. It's not like Chapter 40B where you're required to have these built. And also the town isn't required to build the infrastructure to accommodate these. Similar to other projects, the developer, that would be on the developers tab. And again, just another way of saying what I just said, proximity to major routes and thoroughfares, proximity to pedestrian and biking infrastructure. These are things to think about when you're looking for a site. Existing downtown, village center, shopping areas and places of employment, proximity to schools, recreational opportunities, protection of preservation of the environment, inclusion of affordable housing, potential for redevelopment of abandoned, vacant, or underutilized buildings and lots, and just making sure that the site constraints that may make it more difficult to develop. So again, going back to this little map here, these were just all the sites that we looked at. I put in asterisks areas that were submitted as part of the action plan in March 2022, which was a requirement for MBTA communities to be in interim compliance with the law. The revised final guidelines were released in August of 2023, which at that point, public land was not allowed to be included in these areas. So that's why you see the Wrentham Development Center is off the list. The Chestnut Mount Street, that we'll get to it when we get there. Okay. So, and again, once we did run these through, it's not just picking a site. You also have to run it through a spreadsheet or a compliance model to make sure that all the proposed locations meet those requirements. And so this is kind of what's involved in it. It was a GIS mapping and a spreadsheet. And even though I love spreadsheets, I could not do this one. So that's why we had the engineer help us out with that.
Rachel, could you do me a favor and go back one slide
Let's see. Resume.
to that map with the circles on it?
Yeah.
So how did you land at these 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 circles versus other parts of the town that aren't?
Well, I'm not going to, I don't think you or the town doesn't want anything in West Wrentham. That's for sure. And again, that was also a kind of, I did an overview, but in these other slides, it kind of goes through that. Not only looking at the law, you're looking at the guidelines, you then look at your master plan, you then look at, there's some, the Commonwealth Sustainable Development Practices. And so, and some of these areas were just, somebody said, hey, what about this area? Okay, I'll include it. I didn't say no. If somebody sent me an area to look at, I looked at it. And while I may not have run it through the whole compliance model, because that's only for sites that we thought might actually work, I did consider it at least to the high level items. And so the Wrentham Development Center, the downtown Green Street, High Street, Hagopian Red Bird Farm, these, I think it was, we discussed it with, I think it might have been you and maybe one other board member, it might have been Jim or Chuck, Joe Botash and Chris Gallo and Kevin. And these were the ones that we were going to submit as part of the action plan. And I think at that point, we really wanted to go for the Wrentham Development Center. But as I said, the revised guidelines came out in August of 23 and said that we cannot use publicly owned land as part of that. Does that answer your question?
It does. I just, for everybody's edification, just trying to, if you take to the left of Circle 2 and to the right of Circle 2 up by Norfolk and Wrentham, there's some pretty big tracts of land. And just curious, kind of the rationale for leaving out sections of the town. And maybe it's because it's all built up and you wouldn't be able to get acreage there. And maybe it's not the most desirable. I'm just trying to figure out what the rationale is for saying these are in, and other areas that we haven't circled are out just automatically.
Yeah, sure. So as your master plan that has only a few areas to sort of focus on. So why work smarter, not harder? This was a 2-year process that got 10% response rate, which is, I know some people don't think that's a lot, but in the planning world, it's quite a bit to get a 10% response rate on surveys. And so these were the areas that the town wanted to focus on. And then if you go into these, it goes into a little bit more what each of these mean: priority growth, economic, and historic preservation, all those items. So that's really why development center and town center are really the big areas. And then when that one didn't work, I tried to figure out some other ones. And also, if you look on here, I could bring up the GIS, but there's a lot of wetlands in here on this one, as well as over here. As you know, this is the Park Place subdivision right up here. And this is all Mill Pond. And so that's all wet. And that area can't be included in a, it's not included, it is taken out of the developable land area, so you
Okay.
can't count it towards your 50-acre requirement.
And as you said before, 25, you have to have 125, and then you can have multiples of the other 25.
Yes,
Okay.
5 at 5 acres, and they can
Okay.
all have different densities, all those sub-districts.
Okay. Thank you.
So again, went through there, run it through that compliance spreadsheet, and then we'll get into them. Okay, so, and this was just a recap from my last presentation. This one is 3 different 40Bs, and actually, you know, looking and adding this one as well. Some of this is over 55, so that can't be included. And again, there's 3 different zoning districts in here, and as part of the compliance model, you run the underlying zoning through that. So not really near an existing downtown or village center, higher unit density to get to the state compliance. And again, required a lot of changes to the underlying zoning because there's 3 different districts in there. I'll run through these quick. Site evaluation on the Wrentham Development Center. I went over that already. Public land can't be included. Site evaluation, these were the 2 options that the consultant and I settled on, which was making a mandatory mixed use overlay or for the downtown to take credit for that development that's already happening in downtown. And then creating a traditional, quote unquote, traditional MBTA Community Multifamily Overlay District over at the Wampum 495. And then option 2 was just Wampum 495 without the downtown. If option 1 requires changes to the Village Zone B to make sure that the 2018 rezoning vision is, you know, a developer adheres to that. Option 1, here it is, mandatory mixed use with the MBTA multifamily. You can get a reduction in, I think it's 25%. So 562 was what you'd have to have. This is just some of the things that we would look at if we were going to do this, of changing in the Village Zone B. Option 2, if we don't go with that and just do the quote unquote traditional, all these lots, 16 units per acre, 25% lot coverage. We maintained all of the existing dimensional standards that are in the residential 43, which is front setback of 40, side yard setback of 25, max stories is only 2.5. So this is not a ledge view project. It's 2.5 stories and a lot coverage of 25%. I did do some other 31 Dedham Street is kind of the similar, trying to find some examples for you in future presentations about how to look at it. And this is just some of the amenities around Wampum 495 area that are very much in line with what the state is looking for in this guidelines and law. Site evaluation on Chestnut Street, there's a lot of issues with this site. There's steep slopes, there's wetlands, there's at least 3 different easements that go through this property, all making this infeasible to develop. And if you were going to develop, it's going to be right up against the backyards of those houses on Chestnut Street. So site evaluation on Green Street, again, I'm maybe a more traditionalist, commercially zoned in a split tax rate town. You're going to get less taxes on residential use in a commercial zone. Not consistent with the existing development patterns. It's all industrial down there, not near an existing downtown or village center. Not really good for families with children. Because if we're at Metacomet Greenway, it's kind of near there. Site evaluation, Beach and Taunton Street, large portions of this area are, as you know, because we're going through the permitting process on these. Natural resources, also portion of this site is going to be age restricted. So that is a concern. site evaluation on Route 1. We did both of these I think we looked at both of these together. And again, you can take credit for an existing development. So that's still on the cards if that's what you desire. Again, commercially zoned, split tax rate, not consistent. This is all commercial. Also, you guys just did a rezoning of Route 1 only a few years ago. I did not see multifamily housing in there, not near an existing village downtown center. There's no safe access to pedestrian or bike facilities. I know in the time that I've been here, there's been quite a few deaths on Route 1. And then this one was the select board request of the Wrentham Village Premium Outlets. Again, it's commercially zoned, split tax rate. It is not an underutilized facility. The state is very clear on this. It's not an underutilized facility that can be redeveloped into new multifamily housing. So that's why this one was not included in that. I don't consider the village outlets to be underutilized. And then I'll go into what if we don't comply, but we'll stop there for now.
Is there a state definition for underutilized? I mean, if the village outlets are running an 80% vacancy or a 10% vacancy rate or 20% vacant rates, that still doesn't seem that way, but there's legal interpretations maybe that we could try to find out on what does underutilized actually mean. Mr. Lawrence?
Yeah, Rachel, I don't know how big the parcel is or whatever, but what about talking about underutilized things? What about that Campgrounds of America development that nobody's ever moved into across from the Wrentham outlets?
Yeah, so I had considered that one too. The only reason I didn't include it in here was because it's already about, from the street grade, it's already about a story to 2 stories higher than the street grade. And so then that's going to make a 2.5 story or 3 story building look like it's 5 stories. And so that's going to be very imposing on the surrounding area neighbors of it's Nickerson to Berry Street over there. So that's why it wasn't included, because they're not required to take out land, and do an earth removal operation to bring it down to grade. So that's why I didn't include it.
But it is underutilized.
I don't think it's all 50 acres either. I don't think it's all 50. So you'd still need to find some more spots for it.
Yeah, it is underutilized though. It's been vacant for years. Maybe that's, I
That
understand
in
the
my
height,
mind is an underutilized facility. The outlets is not an underutilized
Right.
facility.
but it might be
We've been
something
wondering
they're
what we
opening
could
up a pottery
possibly
barn.
do. We've been wondering what could possibly happen there for ever since I've been on this board, which is over a decade. I mean, if that could be made to work and we decide we're going to do something, it might have some potential. That's all.
Mr. Chair, do you mind if I make?
I
a
am
comment?
adding it to the list now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Please, I'm good.
Mr. Chair, is that okay if I make a comment?
Yes, go ahead, Vice Chair Kellen.
Thank you, Chairman McKnight. Just to provide a tiny bit of clarity, the reason that we suggested the outlets was a couple prong. We're taking the mentality here that the outlets is our largest commercial tax base. It's no surprise to anyone. I think it's $3 million a year, if I'm not mistaken. Someone can correct me if that number's wrong. It's no surprise to anyone what's going on with the outlets in Kittery. If the outlets in Wrentham ever shut down, that would be a catastrophic hit to our tax revenue. So that's one of the reasons why we thought that if something ever happened to the outlets, we might actually want a 750 unit residential development that has, the outlets actually has a lot of things going for it that I think and that we think make it a viable candidate. It's got its own package plant. It's got, it's directly off the highway. I understand it's not near a downtown. And if I'm reading the zoning correctly, those are, things that they would like to see, but you don't have to have it directly downtown or near public transportation or whatever. So my job isn't to make it easy for them. My job is to do what's best for the town. And that's what I'm trying to do. So that's why we think the outlets is a viable option. and one that we would like the planning board to strongly consider.
Great, thank you, Vice Chair Gallo. Rachel, question. Somebody threw out some wild ideas, and it's not that they couldn't be developed. There'd be a cost structure to it, but if there's areas in town that are, for lack of a better word, polluted or undesirable to development, or the town dump, you know, and somebody may find that they could line a dump and put piles in and build over it and never have a problem. Are those options that we don't have uses for? And it would be a costly enterprise for a developer, but it's not to say that those things couldn't be thrown on the list as options and likely because of the cost not built.
No. That is one of the items that they say other constraints that would make it so infeasible for it to be developed, for it to be ever developed.
Well, it's not that it couldn't be. I've seen developments over, you know,
okay.
over all kinds of stuff.
What you have to do, you as a board, as a town, I am not the final say. I am not the state. I am not the Attorney General's office. What you as a board, as a town, have to provide something that, you know, you think is going to be comfortable to the townsfolk and let them vote. This is a very new law. So I don't have all the answers. And I don't think the state has all the answers. So I think once we do figure out where we want to sort of focus this, I would strongly suggest submitting a pre-application to the state to see if it does pass and see if it does fall within these guidelines or these guardrails that they've put up. So
Okay.
I've read them in a certain way, and you know, it's up to you. It's not for me to argue one way or the other. I've had a recommendation based on how I've understood this law and guidelines for the past 3 years. So,
Okay.
Mr. Chair McKnight, may I make a statement?
Yes. Go ahead.
In all due respect, Rachel, in your presentation, though, you are telling us that it needs to be downtown. It needs to be feasible for families and children. It needs to be desirable for developers. In reviewing other towns and what they are zoning, I am seeing Shrewsbury zoning right next to Route 9, Route 20, going against things that are options that are being presented to us as a town. So this is what's raising questions, because we're seeing other towns do just the opposite than what's being proposed to us. And for me, and I'll speak, you know, I'm not going to speak for the entire select board, but my guess is it's their sentiments as well. My concern is our current residents and this town. So to make things feasible for developers and feasible for new families moving in, not my priority. My priority is to do the right thing for the town as well as it relates to this mandate. So I know that you're saying that it's our decision, but in your presentation and giving us these parcels to look at, you are stating needs to be downtown, needs to be feasible for families and children, needs to have sidewalks. And now you're saying you don't have all the answers. So just trying to be respectful to giving the right information to all of us so that we make the right decisions as it relates to these parcels.
Thank you. But I think what I'd like to do now is we've spent about an hour and a half or a bit more, a little bit less than that on this. What I would ask is, I think we're obligated to open up for public comment. But what I would ask is not, I'm going to do short, very short segments. I think like 30 seconds for people, because this is information sharing. We're not going to go into depth on these things. But what I would like to know is if anybody has a question that they would like answered as part of the public comment versus giving us an opinion, so that we can take that comment or that question and get back to folks. We may not have the answer tonight, and I'm not sure we're going to spend the time deliberating on it tonight, what the answer to that is. But I think it would be important for us to know that you have something that doesn't make sense to you in terms of the information you've been provided. So from a public comment standpoint for tonight's meeting, I'd like to focus a very narrow view into that versus commentary and or opinions. So We'll
Mr.
give
Chair,
it,
do you want me to
short
put a
windows for
time
people.
limit on it? Do
Excuse
you
me?
want me to put a time limit on these again?
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, it doesn't take long to ask a question, so we're gonna maybe limit it to 30 seconds a person or something. We're not gonna, I don't think we're here tonight to answer those questions, but allow us to look those over and get answers back either through the Board of Selectmen or the website or through the next planning board meeting we have. And that way we can at least understand what's not clear to people, that we can start to focus on finding answers for. So with that, we'll open it up. Please raise your hand if you have a question to ask either the Board of Selectmen or the Planning Board or EDC or the assessor.
Mr. Immonen has his hand raised.
Name, address, and affiliation, please. Or
Leo Eminent, 650 East Street. My question is, if the town approves a zoning bylaw in compliance with the state act in November, can we go ahead and hear a debate by the state government and the legal part? And if it turns out it's not legal, can we then go ahead and delete that zoning bylaw at a town meeting, perhaps in June 2025?
Thank you, Mr. Inman, for that question. I don't have an answer. We'll find out and make sure it gets answered. Other questions that you might have that we can get back to you on?
I see Andrea has their hand raised.
Name and address, please.
Hang on, I'm trying to get this on. Hi, Andrea Murphy, 1680 West Street. I'm not going to ask this right. I wasn't prepared to ask a question, but so I was going to try to look up this information before I said it. I just read something recently about it was like a nursing home. There was a settlement that the state had just donated money for. It's not assisted living. It's not a nursing home. It's something like that. I'll find this information for you, but I'm wondering if something like that qualifies for the type of units that could be put in the town.
Okay, thank
So
you.
you can just leave that as a to look. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll look that up.
Thank you very much.
Take that under advisement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other hands. Rachel, do you see anybody?
Mr. DePlacido has his hand raised.
Yes, sir.
Just as a citizen, curious if and when a parcel of land's rezoned and 750 units are added, does that, my understanding is you don't have to have affordable in those 750 units. Is that correct on that? Or can you have affordable units in those 750 units? Okay. And where I was leading with this is that it seems to me like you'd want to have a significant amount of affordable units to compensate for the 750 units that you would be adding, because your denominator as a whole town, now you'd have to, if you're adding 750 units to the town's housing inventory, you'd actually then have to have 10% more affordable, or basically 75 more units of affordability just to stay in compliance.
That's a good point. Thank you, Mr. DePlacido.
So, all right.
Last call. There'll be more opportunities to ask questions, certainly.
Joanna McFarland.
Oops, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. McKnight. This actually isn't a question or comment, but unfortunately the EDC did not have a quorum tonight, so we were not able to publicly participate. But as a resident, I was hoping to give the town and the boards an update as to what the EDC has been doing. And we have had a couple of working group sessions, small working group sessions, our last being this past Monday with Rachel and a few of our members, just going over the parcels, trying to really get an understanding of, as in-depth of an understanding of what we need to do as a town. And what the EDC is really concentrating on is vacant or underutilized lots in the town. We have rezoned several parcels of town over the last decade. and they haven't been moving on the commercial side. So we're trying to look at those as would those potentially work as having the MBTA zoning overlay, and perhaps that could stimulate some kind of development.
Great, thank you for that update. All right, with that, I think, yes.
Mary Sen has raised her hand.
Okay,
Yeah, just to follow up with Mrs. McFarland's comment, I just wanted to ask about the old Crosby pipe site, because that was a environmental cleanup site. So just want to make sure the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted on that one, because if you do develop that and there's issues, you don't want this town to get sued over problems with that site, because that is that's been an open area that could be developed. And as you rightly so, you said that, but I just was wondering about the environmental study, if that's all been sorted out. Thank you.
great, thank you. Mr. Sweet, were you raising your hand or no?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I was just gonna ask, and maybe through you to Rachel or the planning board as a whole, is the planning board had discussions or going to have discussions around the mandatory mixed use component, which would reduce the requirements for the 750 units? I'm just wondering if there's been talks about that, which I think Rachel would know better than I, would put the maximum unit count at around 580 or 5 something. Just looking to see, I think I haven't heard any of that tonight. So, and I'm not sure that folks are aware of that.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. And we do have a relatively new board. We got three new members. So this was a really good information gathering for them. And I think that's something we put on the list in terms of trying to reduce that number if we can through mixed use. To Ms. Sen's note, the downtown is been rezoned into different components, and we have a developer who's interested in building down there. So that actually, I think that mixed use development can give us some leverage too. They've already got 8 units per as a maximum to that development. So there's definitely some possibility that that's going to help us. So. With that being said, Mr. DePlacido, I think we're all set. Do you want to close your public hearing? And thank you.
Yeah, make a motion for the Board of Assessors to close their public hearing. Once again, I don't think Ed O'Neill or Irene Levesque can make a comment on it. So on their behalf, I'll close the public hearing.
Great. Thank you for your participation, Mr. DePlacido. Vice Chair Gallo and the Select Board, thank you for coming.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. We're going to also take a roll call vote right now to adjourn. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I look forward to doing many more with the planning board. It's been great. At this time, Vice Chair, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Selectman Anderson, second by Selectwoman Rouse. We'll do a roll call vote. Selectman Anderson?
Anderson, yes.
Selectman Harrington?
Harrington, yes.
Selectwoman Rouse?
Rouse, yes.
Chris Gallo, yes. Motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do we have the planning board have a motion to continue the public hearing on MBTA Community Zoning to our next meeting on, what is it, the 17th? No,
May 15th.
15th.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? Roll call vote, Mr. Boissy.
Aye.
Mr. English,
Aye.
Mr. Lawrence,
Aye.
Mr. Maloney,
Aye.
Mr. Orban,
Aye.
Mr. Woodhams. I heard it. Mike McKnight, aye. 7 in favor, no one opposed. Motion